I agree 100% that I'll never be completely self-sufficient, right? You're always going to rely on your community. You're going to rely on some level, we're always going to rely on larger systems. It's just part of the way our culture is created, you know? With that said, for me, self-sufficiency is really being able to stand on your own 2 feet with your family, reaching out to the folks that you want to reach out to, you know, to create some sort of community and build those relationships on a small scale.
Inside of the city, the people are crazy, out of their minds, they ain't got a clue. We gone away, headed west for Montana, left family and friends, all I got now is you. We both got new jobs, a house and a homestead, thinking this was the life, all that there'd be. After our firstborn, you had to stay home. That's when the work got in the way for me. Well, I started farm hop life. We'll come to your farm to help and to wander. Me and the family, a truck and an RV. Send us a message and there will be.
This is the Farm Hop Life Podcast, a traveling homestead family. I'm Matt DeRozier. Today my guest is Al Storm, located in North Florida. He started advancedprimitive.net. He is located in North Florida, lost 80 pounds by eating a more natural diet, then started producing his own food by hunting, fishing, gardening, and raising livestock. How's it going, Al?
Good. How are you doing? Thanks for having me on.
Yes, thank you for being here. I appreciate your time. So, all your pictures that you post, not all of them, that's not fair. It's always like fishing on the beach, and it's like, is this guy like retired? Like, does he work? You just only post the good stuff, I guess.
So, well, no, I definitely, I work. I have a regular 9 to 5. I do get out to the beach to fish usually once a week. I take the kids out, you know, I try to get out once a week if possible. And also, you know, at the house, we have the garden and the, you know, the chickens and the livestock and things like that. So we're definitely busy, but definitely try to prioritize, you know, surf fishing. Try to get out there once a week. Sometimes it's a little bit more, sometimes it's a little bit less, but I think those are the best pictures, right? Those are kind of living in Florida. I think that's what people find interesting more than sometimes a picture of a tomato plant.
Yeah, I don't know. Some tomato plants really get a lot of views, and I can't figure it out.
That's true.
So, man, the losing 80 pounds, we're definitely going to get into that a little bit later. Man, that's quite the teaser. But how did you get started? And maybe this ties into it. How did you get started homesteading?
Well, so actually, it does kind of tie in. So basically, back in 2015, when you know I ran into some health issues, and I could talk about that later if you'd like. I can hold off on that. But basically, you know, decided to start eating a little bit healthier, and kind of followed a guy named Mark Sisson's plan. It was the Primal Blueprint is the book. And basically you kind of eat meat, fruits, and vegetables. And so I started, you know, buying those things at the supermarket, found myself going to the grocery store and thinking that the quality wasn't great. So progressed to farmers markets, then a local farm. And then I thought to myself, I could do some of this stuff myself, right? So we were going to move anyway. We were looking for a house with a bigger yard. So we decided to go to a place where we could have livestock and a large garden. And it just kind of progressed from there. So there wasn't a moment necessarily. It was just kind of a slow progression where started eating healthier, decided to, you know, eat locally, and then, you know, buy food that was just, you know, sustainably produced, kind of learned things along the way, and then decided I could do it myself. So that was kind of the progression.
Nice. That sounds sweet. So the next question being, what motivates you to grow your own food? Like, just going to the grocery store less and health? Is there more to it?
Sure. So again, starting from eating fast food pretty much every day and moving to going to the grocery store, what I realized pretty quickly was the food in the grocery store wasn't necessarily as healthy as I thought it was. Right, the some of the fruits didn't taste great, and you would do some research and you'd find out, like the cucumbers sometimes would be grown in Mexico, and there's nothing against cucumbers grown in Mexico, but the thought process was, and again, living in Florida, there's got to be people in Florida growing cucumbers, right? So kind of
Sea
between
cucumbers.
just researching methods that folks used and what organic really means versus sustainable. Um, just kind of move forward. And again, there wasn't one moment where it all clicked. It was just kind of a progression. And the goal to kind of grow my own food and do things more sustainably really just came from talking to folks locally who were doing it successfully and following a lot of what they did, and kind of it comes from the community, right? You kind of learn more along the way and you realize, hey, I could do this better. And just wanting to have a better product. Also, especially with the chickens, I'm probably like a lot of folks in America where I was kind of ignorant to how poorly chickens are raised in these factory farms, right? So wanted to really make a difference there. And I really do think, while I'm certainly not against meat eating and animal products in any way, I do think we have a moral obligation to try to do it better, right? And try to create a better environment for the animals, right? So, and again, I think a lot of it came from just a place of ignorance on my part, and I'm sure I'm not the only person where I didn't realize how bad the food that I was eating was. And then even as I moved into, traditional factory farm steak or chicken and eggs, even thinking that was, well, this has to be healthy, realizing that there's misses on that side too. So I hope that answers the question.
No, absolutely it does. And a more like a better way to treat animals. I mean, hunting and fishing definitely ties into that, because what's more healthy for a animal than its natural habitat, right? Than
Sure.
I mean,
Yeah.
like homesteaders, farmers, ranchers, we all do our best to well, in our little, regenerative agriculture, permaculture group, we all do our best to give the animals the best life that we can. Um, but sometimes it still falls short of its natural habitat.
Sure. So first, I think a lot of what's going on in this space is great. I've not, and on my website, I kind of make the point. I've not gotten into raising meat animals at all. Not because I think there's anything wrong with it. It's just not a step that I've taken yet, and because, frankly, I'm producing my own meat from the hunting and fishing. So, um, with that said, I've been a lifelong fisherman. I was I'm very new to the hunting deal. That's something that I just started really getting into a few years ago and went out on my first hunt early last year. So it's only, I've only been on that side of it for a little while, but certainly I think important, I think it's important to try to let animals live in a natural way, in a way that's not stressful. And, also obviously the moment where they're going to pass, right? The harvest, I guess. You don't want that to be stressful if at all possible. I mean, it's not going to be pleasant. We all know it's not a pleasant situation, but we want to make it as positive as possible, right? So you want to make sure everything's done humanely, and I think folks in the small scale farms try to do so. Where I'm not sure that that's happening on the factory side. I feel like there's definitely a lot of room to grow, and I think across all channels, right? Whether it's a hunter, a fisherman, like we could all do better. But with that said, I definitely think folks on the regenerative side, and also most outdoorsmen are trying to do the best, or outdoors people, I should say, are trying to do their best.
Agreed. I mean, so when you had me think of a question and then I totally lost it. But when you go out to fish, what kind of like walk me through that a little bit. What's your maybe your state of mind? Um, is it more for recreation than it is like sustainability, like to sustain yourself or your family, or is it like what are you thinking when you do that?
Sure. So in the, I, as I said, I was a lifelong fisherman. In the early days, I was more or less a catch and release person. So I was going for, out here in Florida, the sport fish of choice is kind of the redfish and the sea trout. And, they're pretty heavily regulated. And frankly, they're hard to catch. So you might go out and catch one, you may not catch one. When I decided to switch over to more of, the idea that I'm going to go out and catch something to eat, more of a meat fisherman, I guess, or a consumptive fisherman, what I started to do was target the panfish. And really the reason that I did this was I wanted to show my kids that we could go, whether it was to a pond or a beach, you could go out and come home with dinner and still have a good time. So that was the plan. The reason I go to the beach so much now is, the beaches that we go to down here, they're not terribly busy. My kids are still pretty young. They can run around in the beach, have fun. They have fishing poles that fit their size. And I also have some larger fishing pole, that I use. Generally speaking, we'll catch something during the day that we can bring home. So, legally and ethically, and it's something that's going to taste good. So they're panfish. There's a lot of fish called whiting. That's probably most of the pictures on my, my Twitter side, the feed, or most of the discussion that you hear is around whiting, or there's another species called pompano. They're both really good to eat. They're small fish. They're plentiful. They're pretty easy to catch. So the mindset when I go out is we're going to have a good time at the beach. We're going to get some exercise. We're going to get a lot of sunshine. We're going to go in the water. But generally, we're going to catch a few fish, smaller fish, but enough to bring home and eat. And, again, it's not necessarily a fill the freezer every time thing. It's, hey, we're going to go out and try to catch lunch or dinner.
When you say that you are new to hunting, what are you hunting?
So right now, living in Florida, wild boar are they're considered a nuisance species. They're actually invasive. They do a lot of damage to farmland and to ranches. And there's a bunch of places close to me and in Florida, and I think throughout most of the Southeast, where you can go on a relatively inexpensive wild boar or hog hunt, and you can harvest a nice sized boar. You can, you can have it processed. There's places around that'll process it for you. It looks like you got it from the butcher shop, and the price per pound, I'm not going to say it's the same as grocery store meat, but it's not as far off as you think it is. And you get a day out in the field. You see the animal. I think it's very respectful for the animal, and I can go into that if you'd like more details. I'm not sure if time permits, but
yeah, sure.
Yeah. So, being new to hunting, there was pushback from friends and family. Hey, why would you want to do that? Just buy your food at the grocery store. And there's a show that I watch. It's called Meat Eater with Stephen Ranella. I'm not sure if you're familiar. So, he kind of brought up the notion that, when you hunt an animal, you have respect for it because you've seen it alive, you know how it passed, and all of your meat came from that one animal. And again, as a small scale farmer, you're going to see this as well. But if you go to the grocery store, that pack of hamburger that you bought may have, I hate to say it, it's kind of gross, but it may have 5 or 6 animals ground into the one package of meat, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that doesn't feel respectful to me. That feels very disrespectful. Whereas, for example, the last, hog that I hunted and harvested, we were able to make many, many meals from it. And my family could look at the picture of my hog hunt and say, that was the animal that produced this meal. And it made me, it was a very, I don't know if spiritual is the right word. I think that may be a little overused, but certainly an emotional bond to making sure that I didn't waste that animal, right? And to make sure that I respected the way that I prepared it. And I just thought it was a much more respectful way to utilize that animal and to really pay tribute to its life. So from that perspective, I think there was a lot of value on that side for me, especially as someone who's trying to eat a little bit healthier. It brought in a lot more of the, kind of, I'm eating something that means something. I'm eating something that matters. So as opposed to, a fast food burger, which is kind of just anonymous, the food actually had a connection to my life and a memory that I had. So it meant a lot. And also just, from a sustainability standpoint, these wild boar had traditionally been trapped, killed, and disposed of and wasted, really.
Right.
So, this is
Buzzard food.
I'm sorry?
Buzzard food.
They were absolutely buzzard food. And there, there are some, bacterial risks. You have to make sure you cook them properly and you have to sanitize properly. But with all of that said, they're delicious and they're very good for you. They're very lean. So as long as you practice, basic sanitation and you cook them thoroughly and everything else, um, it's a great source of protein and a very sustainable source of protein.
I mean, yeah, they're on the edge of like invasive, or some people do consider them invasive and whatnot, and we have to get rid of them somehow. And if we're gonna dispose of them, we might as well take something from it instead of it just letting it go to waste. Like, yes, like the buzzards need to eat too, but they can do just fine off of scraps. And
Well, and if they die naturally and the buzzards eat them, that's fine. But it's kind of tragic if we're either poisoning or shooting something and just leaving it to rot in the field.
wasting.
And right, that doesn't seem right to me anyway. I'm sure it happens I'm sure there's people that would justify it in some way, but for me, if we can utilize that to feed people, it just makes more sense.
You had mentioned, like a spiritual connection, like it might be overused. Maybe in the right context, I feel like it's very appropriate. You had mentioned like Meat Eater and Steven Ranella often, like, and I don't know if he seems like a pretty genuine guy, but who knows what it is like off camera or whatever. But almost after every kill, he like puts his hand on the animal and is like, "Thank you for your life." And so you're having like a spiritual connection with that animal's spirit, like your spirit and the animal's spirit, not necessarily like, your spirit with God, or, whatever it is you believe. I mean, it could be that as well, but it's more human to animal connection, that kind of spirit.
Well, I could tell you, from as someone who did this, I'm 46 now, right? So the first time I hunted was, 45. So it was mid 40s. So someone who went a long period of their life without hunting, without taking an animal's, outside of a fish. But outside of that, a hog just for a variety of reasons, it's more intense. So as someone who hadn't done that for the majority of his life, to do it, I will tell you, and again, as I said, sometimes I think, the spiritual thing, it can be overstated, and I didn't want to seem disingenuous, I guess is what I'm saying. But there something happens, right? There is a deep connection, and certainly I'm a Christian. I believe in God, and there's there's a way that we're connected to the earth and to nature, and obviously, living in this lifestyle, you're connected that way as well. So I certainly see that food as a gift from God, right? The ability to be in the outdoors as a gift from God. And there's also there's a heavy weight of responsibility in taking an animal's life, because if I hadn't done that, that animal would have walked away, and that's not lost on me. So again, I'm certainly not a vegan. I'm not a vegetarian. I don't see anything wrong with carnivorism. With that said, I think there's a heavy, heavy responsibility that makes us do things the right way. And, just as a little bit of a background, I had practiced shooting at the range for years before I went hunting. And the guide commented on the fact that I actually undersold my shooting ability. And I said, well, because I wanted to make sure I didn't miss. It was important to me that I didn't miss. So, and by miss, I don't mean miss the animal altogether. I mean, hit the animal in a spot that didn't kill it quickly, So, and I can also tell you, I let the first animal I let walk by because the heaviness of the moment hit me. And for anyone who's not taken an animal's life, it may be hard to understand. And now that I've done it, I fully understand it. There's a great responsibility. And I'm sure, again, I don't farm for meat right now, but I'm sure that everyone who has feels that as well. There's a heavy, heavy responsibility.
I went hunting last fall on a friend's ranch, and it was the first time in 5 years that I had shot a deer. Like I had, gone out in the back country and tried and tried and tried.
Sure.
Didn't do very good in the scouting, I wasn't wasn't my time, I guess. I don't know, just
Right.
didn't do it right. And after I had shot that deer, like my hands were shaking, like just thinking about it, like kind of feel like that adrenaline just like, I don't know, it seemed like for 45 minutes I just had all this adrenaline just pumping through my body, just like that moment of taking another animal's life, like just, and hopefully it's something that you just never get like numb to.
I, you know, it was the same for me. It almost seems surreal
Mm-hmm.
the first time that I hunted, and I hope it never goes away. I don't think we should ever lose sight of what we're doing and the reason that we're doing it. And there's also a connection to all that have done it before, right? Whether you're a farmer, a fisherman, or a hunter, we all kind of look up at the same sky, right? We've looked up for millennia, right, at the same moon and in the same woods. So there's definitely a connection to those who have done it before you, to those who will do it after us, right? A responsibility to those to make sure that we're doing it properly, um, and to the animals, right? Because at the end of the day, we want to be worthy of their lives, right? We want to make sure that the sacrifice that they're making is worthwhile for nature, whatever you may believe that to be. But I do think we all are part of the greater, whether you want to call it the greater circle or the greater, whatever it is that you believe. I do believe we're part of a system that's bigger than us, and we have a responsibility that's bigger than us. So we want to make sure that we're worthy of the resource that we're taking up, right, in the larger scale. So, again, I think all of that really went through my head in the minutes and hours after that hunt, where it's a surreal experience in my opinion. It's very emotional, but I think I grew from it. I think I'm a better person after doing it than I was before. I hope that I am. I believe that I am.
I can see that 100%. Um, and it's interesting coming into it as an adult versus as a child, where like
Right.
this is just something we've always done, which is the
Right.
way. And maybe that's why there is some disconnect with it versus um, doing it as an adult. You kind of, I don't know, it's you can like, you were so used to doing it one way or not doing it at all, and then you go start something new, get into hunting, like wow, like you're kind of like in tune with your feelings a little bit, and like, I don't know, it's just could be overstimulating.
It is. I really think that it is, and I I don't think it's a bad thing. I
No.
think it's good to recognize what you're doing and the repercussions of it, right? But at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, if I think if you grow up with it, it maybe just becomes part of your DNA, or maybe even part of your family legacy, which is what I really hope to bring to my kids. Is we feed ourselves from the land, right? And we're part of the land. We're part of this system where and I'm certainly, it's not my parents' fault, right? It's just the way that they grew up too. But I grew up, you get your meat from the supermarket, and if you don't eat it all, it's okay because it came from the supermarket, and that's just kind of the mentality that led to me being pretty unhealthy, having a bad relationship with food, and again, I'm not blaming society or anything else. It's just, I think food becomes a throwaway commodity for a lot of people, and it's unfortunate. Um, hopefully my kids growing up with this lifestyle see food differently, respect the animals a little bit more. And I'm not pointing the finger at anybody. I'm saying this was me. 40 years of my life, this was me. Um, really, I hope that it changes their way of thinking. Whereas they're probably not going to have that big moment of this is amazing after 45 years, but maybe their whole perception of the food chain changes.
Sure. Man, moving on to your garden. So, what kind of like methods, practices, or techniques do you have? Like, do you do square foot gardening, like straw bale, raised bed, anything?
So
What?
sure, I did some of the square foot gardening early on, when I first kind of tried to be more productive, it was okay. I have found, and I know a lot of folks don't love it. I do a lot of container gardening. So,
Okay.
and the reason is frankly, I rented when I was kind of starting up. I was renting, and then we moved into a house with a smaller yard. Now that we have a bigger yard, I've continued. But right now, it's a combination between raised bed gardening and container gardening.
I don't see a problem with that. There's another guy I talk to regularly. He's on the men's forum that he's like he's also in Florida.
Right.
He's like the soils here like is so sandy. Like
It is.
I can't I can't really grow much in the ground. Like I have to work really hard to make it usable. So he's like I just either do raised beds or do like a bunch of mulch, or I don't remember exactly what he said, but
Sure.
he's like it's just too sandy.
So there's a local farm out here, and I've learned a lot from them. And I actually, when I started, I was buying, it's a you pick it kind of farm, and they grew in containers, and they kind of said it's the reason that they do so is because of the soil out here, and also the number of bugs. The bugs are really difficult in Florida and a lot of the Southeast. So they do, container gardening. And, as I said, like my tomatoes right now, we're out in raised beds. I have some squash out in some raised beds. I'm growing some okra in raised beds and some other okra in a container. So we'll see how that works. Some the peppers are in containers for the most part, just because container gardening with peppers is pretty easy. So a lot of it is just based upon what's going to work best. And really, how do I maximize my yield while still trying to be as sustainable and thoughtful as possible. And, we all make decisions, right? It's, good, bad, and different about how we want to do things. Is a tomato grown in your backyard using conventional fertilizer better than an organic tomato shipped in from California? I have an article on my blog about that. I don't know that there's a definitive answer. I've kind of gone with the local tomatoes better. But that's just my preference. That was the conclusion that I reached for myself and my family. Now that may not be everybody's decision. That was just my decision. Because, you go out and you meet, there's a social aspect too, right? Where you either do it yourself or you meet the farmer that grew it. So I thought that was great, as opposed to someone saying it's organic because it passed agreed upon measurables, but how do we know what those measurables are yet? I can talk to the farmer and he can say, well, I'm not organic because of X, Y, and Z, but I do this. And I also feed it to my kids. Well, I feel pretty good about that. So,
Right.
That's a decision that I made. I'm not saying it's the right one or the wrong one. It's just, that's the one that I made.
I mean, was that organic tomato from California also shipped organically? Like, what did they have to do to it, like, in order to get it from California to the grocery store? Does it stay organic? I don't know. Like, don't they wrap like strawberries in like nitrogen and stuff to get them to transport? And that's why like you see like the tops of them are still pretty white at the most grocery stores. You know what I'm talking about?
Absolutely. Yep. And also, like, tomatoes are shipped in green and there's a gas that they use, right? I can't remember the name of the gas right now. I've read about it, but they use a gas to ripen them, as opposed to, picking them when they're vine ripened, right? So if you get a vine ripened conventional tomato from the local guy down the street, for me, it makes more sense. It doesn't mean it's going to make more sense for everybody. Some people may just like that organic label, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But, our family just made the decision. We're going to, kind of go a different route with it. And living in Florida, we're blessed. There's a lot of local farms. You can kind of grow tomatoes year round here. So, we've done pretty well with that. And that's kind of the way we've gone with it. We find we enjoy our food a lot more.
That gas is ethylene. I heard it recently too, and I was like, what is that gas? I know what he's talking about. It's ethylene is the gas that ripens tomatoes. And tomatoes produce ethylene naturally, so like to ripen themselves, but we're using it artificially too. And who knows that is it an organic ethylene gas that they use to ripen those tomatoes? I don't know.
I'm not sure. And I'll tell you a funny story. I've been gardening for a while. I did it just more of as a hobby, not so much to as true food production, right? Until recently. But even when I was younger, I grew, a few tomatoes or whatever. And I grew cucumbers one time. And I did not realize that cucumbers, again, I was in my 20s at the time, probably, or maybe early 30s. I didn't realize that cucumbers didn't have a waxy coating when they grew. You know that waxy coating you get at the store?
I think
I was
so.
like, why?
Yeah.
What's wrong with these cucumbers? They're not, they're bumpy and they don't have that coating on them. I thought there was something wrong with the cucumber, but it was actually just, there was something wrong with the stuff I'd been buying my whole life.
That is kind of funny.
Yeah, it was just complete ignorance on my part,
Related. We when my son wants an apple, he'll ask. So like the little game we play is like peel it like a snake, and so I just take out the peeler and like I'm hand peeling the apple, and it's so gross when you can see like the wax kind of like start to separate from the actual peel of the apple. And you're like, oh God, I eat this? Like, yuck.
It's true.
Just eating wax all the time.
Isn't it amazing?
Yeah.
But we've just accepted it, right? We've kind of accepted that as this is normal. And again, an apple, right? That's not what we would consider to be a processed food. Yet, to me, that's processing.
Mm-hmm.
So,
absolutely.
Another interesting thing living in Florida, and I never realized this, when you buy orange juice, a lot of times there's things in the orange juice because, it sits in the container so long, it's been pasteurized, it doesn't taste so good. There's things that can be put in the orange juice to make it taste better. But when you actually go here in Florida, there's some from one that I go to, local farms that squeeze their own juice there and you can buy it same day. And the first time that the juice here locally was $10 a gallon. And my first reaction was I couldn't believe I was paying $10 a gallon. And after drinking the juice, I said, I don't know how I thought I was getting good orange juice for, whatever I was paying before, $4 a gallon.
Right.
Because it tastes like you're eating an orange, where if you're drinking, pasteurized year-old orange juice out of a container, even from concentrate, it doesn't taste like an orange. It tastes like what we think orange juice tastes like now. But when you actually drink from this farm, when it's in season, you can only buy it when it's in season. And when you buy that, it's a different experience altogether. And, I've been buying that for, a few years now. And at this point, I really choose not to drink orange juice from the store anymore because it's just not the same beverage. So I think we've just accepted things for so long, or they become normal to us, that we don't realize how bad they really are. And again, to your example, the waxy coating on an apple that no one thinks about. I mean, that is processing. Same with the cucumber. Whatever it is, right? If it's packaged orange juice that has some sort of.
We were talking about apples and orange juice, and I was going to ask you, when is orange juice, like, I guess oranges in season in Florida? Because if I ever make it down there, I mean, eventually I'm gonna, but just curious about time of year when that is.
Yeah, so they're a winter crop here. So usually, at least the place that I go to here locally in northern Florida, we're at, that starts around Thanksgiving and it runs through probably the end of April, give or take, with, as you know, there's season, there's weather changes year to year, but for the most part, it's usually, you could call it late November through April, you'll be in pretty good shape. And there's different varieties. I'm certainly not an orange expert, or a citrus expert. I know that, between the oranges and the tangerines, there's different seasons that kind of everything comes out. But usually you'll have some sort of citrus and some orange juice available to you locally from Thanksgiving through April.
Nice.
Yeah.
About the orange juice tasting funny also, I've heard, I don't know what kind of juices they use this for, or it could be any or all, that they will claim no sugar added. But what they do is that they take the juice, like, let's say they squeeze the orange juice and they evaporate out all the water. So you just have all of like the natural fructose, like, I guess is it glucose? Isn't it? Like, that's the sugar.
Is it fructose, right? Fructose out of the orange.
Okay. It is. Okay. Yeah. Fruit, like, so you just have like just a high amount of the natural sugars in the juice, but it's technically no sugar added.
Right. Well,
Just
right, they'll
make it taste
condense it down,
sweeter.
or right, like just like making it out of concentrate, but they're not saying it's from concentrate. There, I read an article, and again, I wasn't prepared with all those details, but I know that there's certain things that they can add, whether if it's I don't know if it's an orange oil or a citrus oil. There's something that can be added without disclosure because it's technically an orange, right? It comes from an orange, but it's a concentrated flavor that, because there's degradation of flavor as it ages and through the pasteurization process. So, again, you're not necessarily, is it good or is it bad, right? We're not drinking what we think we drink. It may be completely harmless, but we really don't know. It's certainly not I can tell you from experience, it doesn't taste the same.
Right.
So there's a difference in taste, whether there's a difference in, you know, nutrition. I'm not sure. I'm not at that level. I'm trying to live a little more naturally. And by the way, that doesn't mean I'm perfect. I'm certainly not 100% against eating supermarket food. I shop weekly. I still go to the grocery store, but anything that I can source locally, I kind of try to.
Right. Right. I mean, it'd be like a full-time job just to do it like all locally. And you know what? You put your time to where your priorities are. And
Right.
so you can't do it all.
It's interesting. One of the big criticisms I've heard, just I'm kind of new to social media. I just joined Twitter last year, but one of the big kind of criticisms of folks who are trying to live a little more naturally and grow their own food, and whether it's homesteading or just a sustainable living kind of thing. One of the great criticisms is, well, no one can grow everything and do it all yourself. And well, of course, I don't think anybody's trying to say I'm going to go completely, there may be a few people, but for the most part, I think most folks are just trying to do it a little bit better, right? So if
Right.
it's 50%, if it's 60%, if it's 75%, and you pick and choose the thing, or even if it's 25%, but it's the things that are really important to you, there's tremendous value in that. And there's also the value of whether it's teaching yourself, or more importantly, teaching the future generations how to do it a little bit better. And then you can connect with your neighbors, right? I don't understand the criticism
That's
because,
the key.
right, you're trying to do it better. You're not trying to be perfect. We're just trying to do it a little bit better. There shouldn't be a criticism of that.
Agreed. I think people just make up excuses to do that, like for them to do nothing. Like,
True.
It's like, you know what? That seems like a lot of work. I don't think it's possible. And like write up their little article or their little tweet thread and publish, and then that's like they get a bunch of views that way for the people that both love that and hate that. So,
and in an understated way, it goes back to the man in the arena, right? Where people will criticize whether it's a great athlete or a great businessman and sort of business person and say, hey, this person made this mistake because they're not the ones out there doing it, right? So it's hard to be perfect. It's easy to judge others. Well, I think people that are living more of a low-key kind of sustainable lifestyle, it's easy for someone in the outside to look at that and say, well, you don't do this right or you don't do that right. Well, my take on it is, well, at least I'm trying to do something here. Whether it's
right.
a small flock of chickens getting to run around outside and eat bugs, or it's, granted, I'm growing a tomato in a container. Maybe that's not the ideal way to do it, right? But at least I'm trying to do something different than just eating a box of breakfast cereal every day. At least we're trying to do something a little bit different. And maybe it seems strange to people, but it, we're trying to walk that line, and it's not easy, and there's probably not a roadmap. So I know for myself, like I try a lot of stuff, mess up, and then, all right, let's try it a different way. And that's a lot of the fun. For me, that's a lot of the fun with it. And I share it with my kids. I say, well, Dad messed that one up. Let's not do that again. And there's nothing wrong with that. I don't think that makes me a failure at that or anything else. I think that's part of the process.
But I do want to hear about your failures. What have you tried that didn't work well?
Oh, gosh. Well, I'll share with you. I try to run a marathon. I've run now 5. I've completed 5 marathons. I tried a couple in my early 30s when, I was kind of halfway into fitness and halfway not. And my first one, I pulled a hamstring. The second one, I just wasn't ready, and I just knew halfway through I'm not going to make it. So I had to stop. And I took several years off and let my fitness slip again because I looked at it as a failure and I really beat myself up over it. I was embarrassed.
Sure.
And, I had to take the bus back. I felt really bad about that. And, my ego was bruised. So I took years off and I gained weight. And, I tried again and I ran a half marathon at 39. Excuse me, was I? No, I was 40. I apologize. I was 40 when I ran my first half, and then I was 41 when I ran my first full. So that was a failure, right? You try a fitness goal, or you try to do something and you fail at it. One thing that I failed at this year, I tried to grow some squash. I was trying different varieties of squash, and utter failure. I mean, I had one small butternut squash out of like 8 plants. It was terrible. And my kids helped me grow them, right? So I had to explain to the kids that I did something wrong. I don't, maybe it got too hot too fast or too many bugs. Just didn't work out.
Yeah, that could be. There was I can't remember who I was talking to within the last couple of weeks, another interviewee, and they're like, I've got this one problem with one of my plants and I cannot figure it out. Like,
right.
It's just something I've never experienced before. I just completely blown away, like no idea. Can't figure it out. But
so with the squash, it was plants look great, had a bunch of male flowers, could not get a female flower. Just couldn't buy it, couldn't, not one. Looked out every day. I was gonna hand pollinate, couldn't find one female flower. And the kids helped me plant them and kind of had to explain to them, hey, it doesn't look like this is going to work out so well. But what we celebrated that one butternut squash. It was a tiny butternut squash, and we celebrated it because it was the only one. But
right.
but I think it's good for the kids. I think it's good for the kids to see that too, because
Absolutely.
when they fail at something, right? Or I shouldn't say even fail. No, it is a fail. Sometimes you fail. It's okay to say you fail. So, and there's setbacks and things. You can move on from them. So I think, I certainly don't hide from those things, and I don't shield the kids from those things. These things happen, and it's part of the deal.
What has been the biggest challenge in homesteading?
So, I think for me, it's just been the time. There's a lot of, because of I'm a dad. You got the full-time job. You've got other home responsibilities. It's the time requirements can be challenging. That's one. And the second thing is people don't always understand what you're doing. People find it strange. I grew up in a kind of a suburban setting. Most of my friends and family live in a suburban setting. When I told them I was getting chickens, the question was, why, and then the response was laughter. What are you doing? Why would you? It's a lot of work. Just go buy your eggs at the store. And then there's the issue of, if I want to go away for a weekend, how do we manage that? Because we don't know a lot of people that are going to come over and watch our chickens for us.
Right.
So, and again, it's probably something that struck a lot of folks who have tried to make this transition as I have from, kind of corporate suburban family to rural, still corporate family is, how do you manage the time? How do you still have kids' activities? What happens when you work late and you have to lock the chickens up? How do you manage that? Someone has to get home, someone has to manage it, or do you leave them out a little bit later? So, that's been one, has just been the time, and also just the response from others. Everybody, because there's a lot of pressure to not do it, right? Like, why are you doing this when things don't work out? Like, yeah, that's a lot of work. Why would you bother? So you have to be a little bit resilient and very flexible. And you have to accept failure, because you're going to mess a lot of things up, and people are going to laugh and say, I told you it wasn't going to work out. And you have to say, well, it's going to work out. It's just going to take me a couple tries, So
Right.
It bruises the ego, but at the same time, you have to understand what the mission is. And again, I hate to always say what goes back to the kids, but it really does. That is the most important thing for me is, every mistake I make is something that my kids can learn from. And that's where I'm going with this is, I would rather have the slip ups now and be a little bit embarrassed and admit, hey, I don't know how to hunt at 40 years old, than have to have my kids do that.
Right.
Or I have to teach myself to garden again in my 30s or 40s. so that hopefully the next generation is a little further along when they get there, right? So those are the challenges, though. I guess that was a long-winded answer. I apologize for that, but I think
Not at all.
the the challenges are, one, growing up and being part of a community of mostly folks who live in the suburbs. You're looked at a little bit funny. And then the other thing is that the time responsibilities, because your life has been built around kind of a corporate 9 to 5 deal.
That is the challenge for. I mean, I've gotten a lot of different answers to that question, but time does come up often,
Right.
Time and time again, if you will. It kind of ties into you. Jumping around to the questions here. You talked about self-reliant. What does self-sufficiency mean to you? Like, define it, and what does it mean to you?
Sure. So, and again, I think I alluded to this a little bit earlier, where folks will say, why are you trying to be self-sufficient when you can never be 100%? And I agree 100% that I'll never be completely self-sufficient, right? You're always going to rely on your community. You're going to rely on some level, we're always going to rely on larger systems. It's just part of the way our culture is created, With that said, for me, self-sufficiency is really being able to stand on your own 2 feet with your family, reaching out to the folks that you want to reach out to, to create some sort of community and build those relationships on a small scale. So I think the problem that we've entered into in society is we've not determined those relationships. So the food that we're buying is not the food that we really want to buy. It's the food that's available to us.
Right.
As opposed to, if we go to the local farmer's market, we're being very intentional with what we're buying. For the reasons, maybe they're healthier, they taste better. Maybe it's that the animals, you can see the animals, they obviously are treated very well, right? So you're very intentional with what you're trying to do, as opposed to the current system where, you go to your local giant supermarket and you just buy whatever is BOGO today. That's not living intentionally, in my opinion. So self-sufficiency really comes down to living intentionally, and making the decisions as to, okay, I'm going to rely on quote unquote the system for this, but I'm really going to take control of this aspect of my life. And I think that's part of it, because as I alluded to, I never expected to go into this and say, I'm going to live off the grid, because honestly, I like my air conditioning too much, and I like having a freezer because I went hunting. I had a lot of meat and I could put it in a freezer and save it for a long period of time. So
right.
That is, that's beneficial, but is this freezer sustainable? Probably not, but I do think that self-sufficiency and just being a little more intentional in life is, those two are really interconnected.
How is it that you stay healthy? Anything other than physical health?
Yeah. Well, as I said, certainly, I'm not going to position myself as a weekly churchgoer. I'm not, but certainly grounded in the Christian faith is important to me. Something we share with the kids and the family. We connect. The family connects through nature. A lot of our faith comes with nature. We see a lot of, we see God in nature, right? Just in our daily lives. So it's something we talk about. It's something we believe in. So I think that's, that would probably fall under spiritual health. From a mental health standpoint, I think going to the beach brings a lot of mental health for me. It's something that I look forward to every week. And again, a lot of that's reconnecting with nature. It connects you to spirituality. I go on a morning jog. Most mornings I'm out jogging. I do 3 miles a day. That for me, that's, certainly physically it's healthy. Mentally, it clears a lot of stress. Again, you have a 9 to 5, you have a family, you're trying to do stuff around the house. You need some sort of break. And also, I try to run in a spot that my path generally brings me through a lot of, I see a lot of wildlife. I see some nature. So, there's that sense too, right? Where you're kind of at peace while you're on your jog. So I think that keeps me healthy. I think being out in the outdoors, whether it's fishing and gardening and things along those lines, gardening and carrying food and water out to an animal is really underrated as a form of exercise. If you're carrying 5-gallon buckets of water around, they're heavy. And on days when my wife helps me out or the kids will try to help me carry stuff, they say, man, this is a lot of work. And I laugh and I say, yeah, I do it every morning. So certainly I think that brings a lot of mental health benefits and also physical benefits to you if you're doing a lot of outdoors activity.
Going back to your change in diet.
Sure.
About like physical health and stuff. How long did it take you to lose that 80 pounds?
So it's, as of right now, it's a little bit over 80 at this point, and it's been ongoing. I mean, I started out, I'm 5'8". When I was 39, I weighed about 240. So I'm down now, I'm down 80 plus at this point, and it's taken, I lost, I'm lower now than I was in, say, January, so it's ongoing.
Nice.
And it was, so it's pretty, and I don't know what the final weight ends up being. It may be where I'm at now. I would like to get stronger, so there's a chance that I just kind of plateau off and try to get leaner and stronger. But, it's been an ongoing process, and it hasn't been linear. The first couple of, even though I live in Florida, the first couple of winters between the holidays and just shorter days, I'd gain 10 or 20 pounds back in the wintertime and then have to lose it in the spring. So, and when you get off your routine, anyone who's tried to stay fit knows once you get off your routine, it's easy to slip into a 2 or 3 month downturn. So, I mean, just to answer the question directly, it's been 6 years, to lose that amount of weight, but it's not been linear. I think the first year I lost like 30 pounds and I gained 15 or 20 back. And then the second year it was another 30 pounds and 20 back. So it's been up and down, but the last couple of years I've been able to maintain, 5-10 pound weight gain during the winter, and then I lose it back in the spring. So that's been kind of the plan.
It's interesting that you say that you don't know what the final weight will be, because I have heard similar things from I don't know if you know who Dr. Ken Berry is. He is he promotes the keto diet quite heavily, but he doesn't call it like keto diet. It's just he calls it the proper human diet.
Right.
Like this is just what our ancestors ate. And if you stick to this strictly, whatever like weight is healthy for your body, that's the weight that you will get to with this, I guess, diet, which is more like proper nutrition, essentially, for his arguments. He's like, if you have a weight in mind, that's fine, I guess, but don't kill yourself to get there. Like if by going on keto you get like, what do you call that in math? Like the asymptote or whatever, where like, it goes way down and then it never hits zero. Like it just like, yeah.
So, I think one issue for me was, and I would imagine most people who've lost, a large number of pounds, right, would say this, and someone who's dealt with obesity, I was obese, and I was suffering health issues, and I think most people who've dealt with that will tell you that when you start to get into a mindset where you just live at this, you live looking at a scale. I lost 2 pounds this week. I had a good week. Well, you reach a certain point and you say to yourself, well, okay, I can get lighter, but if I'm not getting stronger, does that matter? Or am I as fit as I used to be? So, one of the things that running marathons did was, well, if I lose weight, then it plateaus, but I improve my running time. Maybe I'm improving my fitness level, right? I'm never going to be the guy that wants the six pack. That's not, the aesthetics aren't super important to me. It's about being healthy. So, you get to this point where, okay, do I want to lose 5 more pounds, or do I want to do more push-ups, right? Or do I want to increase my speed, build my leg strength and my core strength up? And I'm happy to say that's the point that I'm at now, is I'm looking at other health markers or fitness markers, as opposed to just, hey, I need to lose 10 more pounds. Because I'm at a weight now where, I think if I were to just stay at this weight, I would be okay, but if I were to lose 5 or 10 more pounds, maybe that's okay. That maybe, but it's probably not necessary. So, and the other side of it is, I think one of the dangers of setting a a weight loss goal is what do you do after you get there? And that's something I've run into before, right? I hit the goal, and then 6 months later, I was 30 pounds up because I hit the goal and then I started eating the way I used to eat. So, again, the doctor that you referenced, the person that I had started following, and obviously I changed it as I went along to kind of fit my needs. But, the idea of, the kind of that primal blueprint being that you are going to follow the human diet and it's going to be a lifestyle. And you've got to pick something that you can do for your whole life because, at the end of the day, you're not going to hit a target and then just go back to the way you were and be okay,
Yeah, sometimes you'll go too far back. Like you'll have more work at the other, like because you reverted back and then some, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, you don't want to go back and do all that work and then go back and gain 30 more pounds,
Right. And you bring up an interesting point about like, don't need a 6-pack, not sure if this is the weight I would want to be at. Like or the time in a marathon that I'm happy with. Like there's all these different metrics you can be satisfied or not with your progress.
Right. So for me, it was, I set, the first year it was just, I need to lose weight because I had some health issues. So, and nothing major. It was just, weight related. And, it was just kind of trying to lose a few pounds. And then I realized I needed to set a short-term kind of medium range and then like a long-term goal. Right. So we started off, a friend of mine ran a half marathon. We ran a half marathon together, about a year after we started. Right. And then, kind of medium range goal was to run a marathon the following year. And then, I set some weight goals for, I want to be here in a couple of years. So, I think that's important, right? Where you set goals that aren't even necessarily weight loss goals all the time, right? So if you're talking about running a half marathon, you're probably going to naturally lose weight just because you're trying to get to that number, to the marathon number, or the half marathon number. And then if you're saying, well, I want to run it at this pace, the training and the diet that you use to get to that pace is going to help you lose weight. So I think having those targets will help you along the way.
Right. So wrapping up here, what would you tell people that want to get started homesteading, fishing, hunting, anything like that?
Sure. The first thing that I would say is, start small. Don't jump into, if you're going to start if you're going to start gardening, let's say planting a vegetable garden, you don't have to plant every vegetable that you think you're going to eat. And even on the website, in the blog, I talk about, you can start off just growing an herb garden, right? Just some basil, cilantro, something like that. Parsley. You could grow an herb garden and really improve your cooking skills. If you're fishing, you don't have to go out and try to catch, the biggest fish, or you don't even have to do it on your own. You can go out and there's no shame in going out and hiring a guide for a day. I've done guided fishing trips. They're great. I go on these guided hog hunting tours. I'm not, I watch hunting shows. I'm not an expert hunter. I'm not one of these guys on TV. To think so would be laughable. There's no shame in asking for help and finding a guide, even if you're older. And it was intimidating as a, middle-aged guy to go out and admit to a guide, hey, I've taken the safety course, I've passed, but I need help. I have questions, and luckily I was set up with a guide who was great and patient and answered my questions and helped me. There's no shame in saying I don't know how to do something. And when you say that and you're honest with your level of expertise, if it's not there, usually you'll find more than enough people who are willing to help you.
Absolutely. And it goes back also to the thing you said about the hardest thing is time. Sometimes,
Right.
You just don't have time. There's a guy that I follow, like he's been fishing forever, probably same as you. And, he did spend some time growing up in Florida, and he goes like on vacation in Florida and even like in Texas where he lives, he will still hire a guy because when he goes out, he doesn't want to he has limited time. Like
right.
He just wants to go out, catch fish or not, and go home. Like he can't just be there and like dick around to hope it works out. He goes, I'll pay the money to hopefully be successful.
Well, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that.
No, not at
Especially
all.
if you're going to a spot that you've never been before, or, you're taking the kids, right? So, if you're going to take the kids out fishing, you better be catching stuff pretty quick, because they're not going to sit around for 4 hours hoping to catch that one fish, right?
Right.
So that's where a guide comes in, and if it is slow, the guide can take you around, and, here in Florida, go look at some alligators or something, and that'll keep the kids interested for a little while,
Right.
So what you don't want to do is take them out and have a miserable time not catching anything. It's hot, and then they never want to go again, and you ruin it. That's what you don't want to do. So yeah, definitely for someone who's starting out, especially if you're starting with kids, definitely, work with a guide, work with a professional who can get you there. And if you're starting out with gardening, go talk to your local, garden shop or local farm, and ask for advice. And, especially like if you go to a local nursery, a lot of times they'll spend a lot of time with you while you're buying stuff, because they're hopefully going to get a lifetime customer.
Right. Yeah.
That's the plan, right?
That's the plan. Talking about your accounts and stuff, so you've got advancedprimitive.net, and
Yes.
you're on Twitter, Advanced Primitive. What is Advanced Primitive?
So
How'd you come up with that?
as far as, it's interesting, and one of the conversations I had with folks as I was starting, and people were asking kind of what it was going to be about it, I said, I hope it turns into something that I don't expect. I kind of had an idea, but I really wanted it to turn into something that would be a complete surprise. So it kind of started off with, we live in this modern world, and we're super detached from our heritage, right? Our birthright as humans. Mm-hmm. So how do we reconnect the dots while still taking advantage of, the modern conveniences, right? I say it all the time. I like my air conditioning. So my freezer makes it really easy to store food from a safety perspective. If my kids get sick, I do want to take them to the doctors, So how do we connect the dots between what we really should be and what we could be, and still take advantage of these modern privileges that we have? So that was the premise. And I purposely tried not to narrow it down too much. So I guess that's the goal, right? It's a self-improvement idea, really reconnecting with nature, reconnecting with really our heritage and our birthright of who are we as humans, because that's really who when I decided I was going to start this back when I was 39 and wanted to get healthy again, I really had to kind of peel the onion back, right? And say, who is it that I want to be? Because, I was a guy who, I had a good job. I had a family, I had a house, everything seemed to be going pretty well. Yet, there were reasons I wasn't eating right. There were reasons I wasn't taking care of myself. So how do you justify or align who you want to be with who you are, who you have to be to take care of your family? And really, in going through that exercise and trying to live, and I've used the word intentionally, trying to live intentionally, right? I had to go back and say, well, who do I want to be? How do I want to live? And the reality was, I wanted to reconnect with nature and get back to those things. So that's kind of where advanced primitive is. I know that's not a direct answer, but I don't know that I want it to necessarily be, as buttoned up as it could be. I kind of like the idea that it's a little bit open-ended. I like that.
Yeah, it could take you anywhere, and that's the surprise. Yeah.
So the goal is, I guess eventually, if you go to the website, I wrote a book. It's on Amazon, The Advanced Primitive Guide to Sustainable Food Production. It's, it really hasn't sold very many copies. I haven't really put a lot of marketing behind it. It was more in a lot of ways, I wrote it for me,
Sure.
So, and really everything came out of the blog. So anybody that's reading my blog posts have the book. And you'll see it's pretty varied, right? It's kind of like a lot of just reconnecting with nature, producing your own food. Yeah. And also being healthy, but not in the traditional, I go to the gym and I lift a lot of weights and I'm muscular health wise. It's more, how do we age gracefully? How do we get a little bit older without having to go on, not to say that it's bad to be on medicine, but how do we live where kind of we're in control of our own health, right? And if there are medications, how do we make that work within our lifestyle, right? So, one thing I take pride in is my health is well managed through, diet and exercise. Now, if I needed medication, would I take it? Yeah, of course. But I think there's something to be said for, realizing that I had a weight issue and losing the weight as opposed to relying on external means to get there, So, and again, that's not going to work for everyone, but that was my philosophy. And, I think from the advanced primitive point of view, right, that would be the philosophy of, okay, there's medical interventions. I saw a doctor. They said, your choice is medication or you've got to lose weight. I chose to lose the weight. Right now, if they said you have to go on medication and lose weight, I would have done it because, I like living. Right. So, and I have a responsibility to my kids to do that. So I'm not anti-medicine. I don't want it to come across that way, but I do think in our society today, sometimes I think we don't look at, there may be a natural way to do this. Right. And I think that's dangerous because when we become too reliant upon external assistance, we lose track of the fact that we have a lot of self-control. And we have the ability to really steer our own ship, right? So I think that can be a dangerous mindset. And it's something that I see pushed a lot, and it's unfortunate.
I do like your blog posts. They're actually pretty short and sweet. They're
Thanks.
really not that long. They're just super easy to digest. And honestly, you could copy and paste what you've blogged about already and like turn it into like a Twitter thread. Like that would be just to kind of boost the book a little bit, if that was something you'd be interested in.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. That's really good advice, actually. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, you already read it. The content's there, so
right.
But sometimes social media people are like, I don't care. I'm not putting any more effort into this. This is just like a thing.
It's been a learning experience, honestly.
Sure.
I'm not a social media. I'm not a big social media person. I'm terrible at writing. On Twitter. For me, it's been more about engaging other people who share my interests. Yourself included. There's a lot of great folks. I know you and I both follow that, are always there. If you have a question, they always answer or give you some positive feedback. It's great. I don't know that I have a great interest in having, 80,000 followers. It's probably not the target for myself. Right. And I don't know that I don't know that the content that I'm producing would create that kind of interest, as far as you kind of asked what it was all about or what the future was, I would love to at some point, write, write for a magazine or do some freelance writing, something along those lines. But really it's more, hopefully some people connect with what I'm writing and kind of see value in it,
Maybe you could go fishing 2 days a week.
It'd be great. If I could go fishing 2 days a week, that'd be a win at the end of the day.
There you go. Well, Al, I really appreciate you being here. Appreciate your time, and looking forward to talking more in the future.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
A lot of great insight from Al. Check out his website, advancedprimitive.net. Thanks for watching, everyone. Leave a comment, like, subscribe, most importantly, share this video. You can listen to the podcast on Fountain.fm podcast player. You'll love it. If you don't, you can send me all your Satoshis you earned just by listening to your favorite podcasts and supporting those podcasters. Check out our website, farmhoplife.com. You can sign up for our email list or Telegram channel there to be notified when new videos, interviews, and podcasts are available. We're on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, MeWe, and Float. You can email me anytime, matt@farmhoplife.com. You can check out our 20 by 23 project where we're going to help out 20 homesteads in the year 2023. I'm always looking for new people to interview. If you want to come on to talk about homesteading, farming, food security, homeschooling, regenerative agriculture, alternative building methods, or anything else, just fill out the form. Go to farmhoplife.com/guest. Go feed yourself.
Inside of the city, the people are crazy. Out of their minds, they ain't got a clue. We gone away, headed west for Montana. Left family and friends, all I got now is you. We both got new jobs, a house and a homestead, thinking this was the life, all that there'd be. After our firstborn, you had to stay home. That's when the work got in the way for me. Well, I started truck, and an RV. Send us a message and there